Hey, Joe, just real quick before we get going, you had emailed me about the scout troop one time and asked about that, and then I never heard anything. I don't know if that already took place or because remember
It,
I offered a tour of the police department and so forth, and I never heard anything back.
yeah, I mentioned it to him. When we were having when Rockwood was having all those snow days and stuff, that was like when they wanted me to come up, and then I haven't heard from them again here in a couple of weeks. So I imagine here after spring break they'll probably get back.
Okay. Well, the offer still stands that we can give them a tour of any in City Hall, and I'll arrange that they can go into the police department and see the holding cells and the fingerprinting and all of that if they would like.
Great, that'd be awesome.
Yes, sir.
Um, I think we've got enough people, right? 10. Yeah, I think we're good. All right. Carol, did you want to say anything to start? Well, how about we just start with the roll call and then we'll go from there.
Thank you. Councilmember Brost, Member Bartlesmeyer.
Here.
Councilmember Edens,
Here.
Member Delonte, Councilmember Ottenberg, Member Sturman,
Here.
Councilmember Bertolino, Member Berger,
Here.
Councilmember Rambo will note that he's in attendance via audio. Member Patton,
Here.
Councilmember Hopper,
Here.
Member Braman,
Here.
Councilmember Galani, Member Donaldson,
Here.
and Co-Chair Farmer,
Here.
and Co-Chair Holthouse.
Here.
Thank you.
Awesome. Well, I just wanted to start, and Carol, I know your audio's kind of spotty, so if you want to hop in, feel free. If not, that's all right. I just wanted to start by thanking all of you that came by and worked at the tent for the Lawn and Garden Summit. There was a lot of good conversations that were had there. We had a bunch of members here come out for a few hours and talk with people. And of course, I don't see him on there, but Rick Archeski, who was our former co-chair, was out the whole time working a stream table that was getting quite a lot of attention. So we had lots of good chances to talk to people. And some of the people were very well versed in what we were talking about. Others didn't even know what a watershed was. So until the wind took it away, they really liked our map and some other things. So it worked out really well. So thanks everybody for taking some extra time out and coming out and talking to some of the residents. I think our message is starting to spread, which is what we need to have happen.
I would like to echo a big thank you to all sorts of people. City staff, I know, put in a lot of effort, and I have to give a special shout out to Travis, who put up with numerous emails and phone calls for me to pull things together. Would also like to thank Joe for, taking the leadership role on and covering when his other co-chair couldn't be there. Rick Archeski, stepped up as an expert, and Catherine Poulis from M River was the one who actually brought the steam table, and that partnership is one that I hope we can build on in the future. And then I think we have to give a big also a shout out to our committee member Lauren for making the whole event happen, so we could just sort of ride on the coattails of all those people being there and being excited about a spring day and making their community a better place. And I hope it's the start of something that we can build on in years to come. So thank you very much to everyone for that. There's also another upcoming opportunity where we can maybe do a piggyback at a partnership. So I'll be sending the info to Travis if folks agree that maybe in the city newsletter promoting our residents participate in the Open Space Council Spring Trash Bash, and they're also doing some inlet marking. There's some very flexible options for where you can work and when. They're not going as far as saying just pick up trash anywhere like they did during COVID, but I think anything we can do to get our residents into watersheds anywhere and start looking at our creeks and our rivers and understanding how inlets contribute to what happens in streams is a good thing. So if folks agree that that's a low energy way to maybe build on another initiative that's going on, I'll send that along to Travis and send the link out maybe to you all too, if you want to personally promote it or participate. But I think putting it in the newsletter is a pretty low energy way to maybe make a few positive things happen. So
Awesome. All right. Well, I think with that, how about we do an approval of the minutes from our last meeting? If nobody has any questions or changes. Yeah.
I had one note that the date was wrong in the header box. It was correct in the body of the text, but just got messed up there at the top. It says it's the January meeting rather than the February meeting.
Okay. Well, I'm sure we can get that updated pretty quickly. So unless there's any other changes, I'd go ahead and take a motion to approve the minutes from our last meeting. And Lauren makes the motion. Anybody want to throw in a second?
Second.
Awesome. Look like Mr. Bramman. Was that right?
That was me. Yep.
Awesome. All right. All those in favor of approving the minutes, please say aye.
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 Anyone opposed? Any abstentions?
Abstain.
All right, Mr. Hopper, and is that you, Mr. Sturman? Mr. Bartlesmeyer. Hopper and Bartlesmeyer are abstaining. Okay.
And Mrs. Thompson.
I see we've got a couple people on as attendees. I don't know if any would like to make a public comment, but if you would, now would be the time to do that. You just put your hand up and Travis will move you over. If not, that's quite all right. I'll take that as a no. So how about we get to our guest here this evening, and let's talk about some updates from the USGS. Mr. Vunich, do you want to do any introductions?
Mr. Chair, thank you. Mr. Chair, Madam Chair, and members of the task force, tonight we're honored to have Dr. Leroy, the study director for the United States Geological Survey, on our Cox Creek Watershed project. The team from the USGS has been at it about a month, and I thought it appropriate maybe if we could have Dr. Leroy just speak to the task force members and kind of provide us maybe a roadmap for the next few months, and then any initial impressions she might have. And I know she's brought along a few slides based upon our conversation earlier. So I'd like to extend my thanks to Dr. Leroy for taking time out of her busy schedule. And with that, and the chair's permission, I'll turn it over to her. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Great. Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me tonight. I just have a few slides to share, so I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here. Let's see. There we go. So yeah, Joe just asked if I could give a bit of an update on our progress with the project so far. And I thought it'd be helpful to maybe refresh the objectives of the project before kind of diving into what we've done so far. And so there are 4 main objectives. First, we are monitoring the bank erosion at key sites along Cox Creek. We're doing this through terrestrial lidar surveys in some previously identified priority areas, as well as erosion pins. And I'll show what that looks like in a couple slides. We've also collected some field data in support of our modeling efforts, and we'll be doing hydrologic and hydraulic modeling to assess how Cox Creek responds to different design storms. So we'll be looking both at current climate precipitation as well as projected climate precipitation, as well as looking at the effects of added storage in the hydrologic model. And then finally, we will be doing some bank stability modeling at 4 sites. So to date, what we've been able to accomplish so far is some data mining and acquisition of existing data, as well as some existing models. We've had some really great weeks in the field, so I'll talk mostly about that. And we've done a little bit of preliminary modeling work. We've been waiting for our field data to get that really going. As far as getting existing data. We've dug into some of the documents that the WETF has on their website, as well as documents that Dr. Hammer had written, and brought that information into GIS to kind of map out where those priority locations are. And so this is just a map of the Cox Creek watershed, which I'm sure you are all very familiar with at this point. And these triangles all show locations along Cox Creek, as well as a few others that were identified by the WETF and Dr. Hammer as priority locations. We've also gone ahead and acquired existing FEMA flood insurance study models, which we're going to build upon for our modeling work, as well as some ancillary GIS layers. And we're in the process of obtaining reservoir as-built to bring those into the hydrologic model. So the bulk of what we've done so far is our first field data collection effort. So this is just the hydrograph from the stream gauge on Cox Creek down on Wild Horse Road. And so we were out there from February 4th to 16th, had to scurry home because of a snowstorm, which you can see came through with this peak here. And then we were out again at the beginning of March. And actually one more day on the Monday of this week. And so the reason I brought this up is because we are trying to get out there when the water is low, because that gives us the best access to the creek and gives us the most exposed area to collect our terrestrial lidar data. So this map is showing here. So if we've got flow from the bottom to the top, the blue line is Cox Creek. That yellow triangle is our gauge at Wild Horse Creek Road. And so these pink areas are showing our planned terrestrial lidar collection areas. So we have 7 planned areas that are based on that previous map I showed where we had mapped out the priority locations. And we've completed scans, our first baseline scan in 6 out of 7 of these. The only one we've not yet surveyed is TL6. And so this first set of scans is going to be the baseline for all the future scans that we collect, because the idea here is that when we collect these scans, we're basically getting a very detailed, high resolution, high accuracy map of the channel. And so if we come back and collect data in the same location at a future date, for example, after a big flow event, we would be able to compare those 2 scans and give a very accurate estimate of erosion rates, as well as if deposition's occurring, deposition rates. So the terrestrial lidar scanning is kind of our primary way that we're going to be looking at erosion rates in those priority areas. But while we were out, we did install what are called erosion pins, and they're really just pieces of rebar that we put into the bank. And we basically measure from the tip of the rebar down to the face of the bank when we first put them in, and then we come back and measure them again after some time has passed. So these are kind of a supplement to the terrestrial lidar scans, and most, but not all, are actually located outside of those terrestrial lidar scan areas. The idea is that we're trying to get a little bit additional spatial coverage on the creek, as well as try to get some at least sort of general data in the areas that aren't necessarily identified as these erosion hotspots, so that we have a better sense, not just of how much erosion is occurring in those known priority areas, but also just throughout the creek. While we were out, we also installed 7 temporary water level sensors. So if you're ever out in the creek and you see one of these little PVC tubes, we've got a water level sensor in there. And so the purpose for this, for these, is that if a flow event comes through, they'll record the depth to which they're submerged. We know how high they are, and so from that we can kind of get a map of the water surface elevation at those different points, and we can use that to actually calibrate our hydraulic model and give us some sense that it is somewhat reflective of reality. And then we've also got a barometric pressure sensor installed near the gauge. And then finally, in support of the bank stability modeling, we went and collected sediment samples at 4 sites. They're located within our terrestrial lidar areas. And so basically at each site, we collect 3 samples in a vertical profile. If we can see clear soil layers, we tried to make sure to distribute our samples to capture the differences in the soil layers. If not, we just distribute them evenly. You can see it's a very high-tech scientific method of a shovel and a Ziploc bag. So those samples have been sent off for grain size analysis, and we'll be able to use that as inputs in the bank stability model. And then finally, we just have been collecting some topographic data with GPS. The main basis for the model is a DEM or a digital elevation model that's generated from an aerial lidar survey done in 2017. However, those aerial lidar surveys, they don't see through the water. So in any areas where the channel was submerged, it just shows up as flat in that DEM. So one of the things that we did was go out and map the areas in the stream that we think were likely submerged when the 2017 aerial lidar was flown. And so that was probably the most fun day we had, just tromping around in the creek. And so that's all those red points are points where we were collecting that kind of data. And then actually on Monday this week, we sent out a crew just for a day trip to collect some additional data in this sort of lower reach here. And we were also doing some surveying of the reservoir outlet structures to bring that into our model as well. So the last thing that we've been doing in the last month is just some preliminary modeling work. We acquired the hydrologic and hydraulic models that Wilson Hydro had supplied, which we're very grateful for that. And we've been getting familiar with the models, identifying areas where we can supplement some of the data. So for example, that topographic data that we're collecting will sort of fill out the part of the creek that was submerged. And we've started trying to run some initial simulations, not really trying to model any specific events, just making sure we understand how things are set up, and we've had some good success with that. So next steps, we have a lot of data processing to do with our terrestrial lidar data, the grain size analysis on the sediment samples. And then after that spring wet season, we're going to go back and basically do it all again, get those lidar scans in the same areas, grab our water level sensor data off the instruments that we deployed, and remeasure those bank erosion pins. In addition to all the modeling work, which will be sort of ongoing through the year. And then as we mentioned in our proposal, in September 2022, we hope to have an interim monitoring deliverable with the results basically from those first sets of lidar scans for you. So those are the slides I have. I know I kind of went through quickly. I didn't want to take up too much of your meeting time, but I am happy to answer any questions that you have.
Oh, thanks. I think that's great. I see Mr. Sturman's you got your hand up.
Yes, Dr. Leroy, could I ask you to please repeat what you do to check the bank stability?
Sure.
If you would, please.
Yes. So I didn't really go into detail in this presentation, but we're using a model called the bank stability and toe erosion model. And basically what we enter into that model is sort of a profile of the shape of the bank, which we'll be able to extract from our lidar data, as well as the layers of characteristics of the layers of sediment in that bank profile. And then what we do is we'll supply some hydraulic information from our hydraulic models. Basically, how erosive is the water that's flowing by that bank point. And so it'll erode at the toe of the bank based on the water level and the time that you tell the model to run. And so you'll kind of In some cases, what you'll get is kind of an overhanging bank on top and then what's been eroded out by the river. And then what the model does at that point is it computes what's called a factor of safety, which basically it's a stability index. And so it'll basically look for a failure plane that will allow the bank to be stable after that point. And so it's not going to be a perfect prediction of the bank erosion that we might see at these sites, but it can kind of give us a good idea of what an individual flow event might produce in terms of how much bank retreat we might expect from an individual flow event. So we'll look at a few different scenarios when we do that modeling.
Thank you.
Yep.
Lauren, I see you got your hand up.
I really appreciate you taking the time to talk to us tonight, Dr.
Yeah.
Leroy. And while I understand that you're still getting your data and you're putting a report together, I was just wondering if you had any sort of anecdotal information from being out in our creek system. I'm sure you've had experiences all over, so I was just wondering if you had a gut reaction to how we compared to other things you've seen in your career.
Sure. So the first thing that I thought when I got down in the creek was this thing is deeply incised. So that by incised, I mean it's cut down vertically and it's got these very tall banks, and in some cases they are wooded and vegetated and sort of more stable looking, and in some places there's just grass and it's sort of a vertical bank. And one of the most interesting things that we observed while we were out there, at least for me, was we happened to be out there at a time when things were melting. So there had been a lot of snow, it had been really cold, and now things are starting to melt. And so there was no water, there was no flow in the channel in most of the areas that we were working in. But those vertical tall bank faces were still, you could hear it. They were just every few seconds, you'd hear bits sort of crumbling off, just because you've got such that steep vertical face, and things are sort of, the freeze thaw tends to move things around. And so I thought that was really interesting. So this is probably not news for you guys, but you don't even need flow in the channel here when you've got these really steep, unvegetated faces for those to start to erode, just under the force of gravity, especially when freeze thaw is happening, that sort of thing. So yeah, there's a pretty clear correlation between where your priority areas are and where we're seeing a lot of erosion with where things are unvegetated, or where the vegetation is just grass. So that's another thing that's probably not news for you guys, but it's something I noticed when I was in the field. The sediment is extremely coarse in the channel, and so once it gets moving, the banks don't stand a chance. Yeah, those are my gut reactions down in the channel. I'll just add something really interesting. Let me see if I can pull up that map. Move you guys over. Let's see. There was one site where we had visited some of these sites more than once over the course of our trip. And so in here, right around here, I don't know if you can see my cursor, but right around there, we came back and found an absolutely enormous tree that had not been in the channel, and it had collapsed into the channel. Absolutely huge tree, probably related to the fact that things were thawing out, and places that might have been stable when they were frozen are not as stable anymore. And so that was kind of crazy because we were standing right there. So glad that it didn't fall while we were there.
Oh yes, so it sounds like it would not be shocking for when you collect data again at the same points to see a dramatic difference from your first readings to your second then.
Yeah, I mean, I think we've definitely selected sites for these where we're going to see some change. I mean, just in the time that we were there, we observed change, and that was just the course of a couple weeks.
Awesome. Carol, I see you got your hand up.
I do. I just wanted to say, in addition to doing some good science, Dr. Leroy, you're doing a great job of communicating. I had some residents share how proactive you've been about letting them know that people were going to be there, what you were doing, what they would see left behind, that you were going to be back. So thank you for making our job easier by not having to explain what was going on.
Sure. I mean, that's part of the job. So I know we're kind of in people's backyards. It's a populated area, and no matter how much high vis clothing you put on, you want to make sure that people know you're supposed to be there. So it's no problem.
Yeah, we had a few people at the lawn and garden summit that swung by and had mentioned that you guys had been out there. So it's good that they see some of the work that's happening, and I'm excited to see what kind of results we can start to get back here towards the end of the summer, I guess.
Yeah, me too.
Awesome. Does anybody else have any other questions? All right. Well, I can't thank you enough for checking in with us this evening. I know that we are all very excited to see what these results come back as, and certainly based on what we've been learning the last few years, we're not super surprised by some of your anecdotal evidence that you're getting out in the field, but the more sturdy science we can have to back that stuff up, the better. So I think, unless Mr. Vunic, you have anything else, I think this is great. Thanks. Keep up the good work. We're excited to see what you guys can bring back.
Great. Well, thanks for having me, and feel free to get in touch if you have any questions later on.
Will do. All right. We have an update to the work program. I assume that's you, Mr. Vunic?
Yes, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, Madam Chair, and members of the task force, as with our monthly meetings, we provide an update of activities that have occurred over the past 4 weeks between meetings. The updates are shown in the bolded red type, and if there's any questions for the Department of Planning or the Department of Public Works, we'd be glad to answer them at this time. Thank you.
I always appreciate you guys keeping this thing up to date. So it's always good stuff. Does anybody have any questions or concerns? All right. Moving on to our Lawn and Garden Summit.
And Mr. Chair, with your permission.
Yeah.
Mr. Chair, Madam Chair, and members of the task force, as Mr. Farmer mentioned at the start of the meeting, as well as Ms. Holthouse, the Lawn and Garden Summit was hosted by the City of Loveland on March 19th. And the department isn't so much wanting to basically obtain input relative to the overall event, but more so about the Watershed Erosion Task Force 10. And any of the comments that you all received, if you worked that day at the Watershed Erosion tent, and any thoughts you had as you were working there. So it's very important to us as Department of Planning and Department of Public Works staff that if there were suggestions to make it better from those that attended, the residents, attendees, or if you were missing something, we'd love to know about it now so that we can address it when we do other public education efforts in the future, which obviously is a primary goal of this task force and something that is a priority for 2022. So again, we're just hoping you can shed some light on what you heard or what you thought might be an improvement or what you like best about it. And then we'll take that information and try to make our public education efforts as best as possible when we do them in the future. Thank you.
I'll just jump in. The one thing I noticed, and it's actually 100% my fault since I designed the thing, but as we had the banner up, it was a great way, I think, to get people's attention. Obviously, the stream table helped a lot too. But I think probably, Travis, before we do another one of these, I will send you an updated file where maybe we are putting an indicator on where our kind of most needed spots are, so people can have a better idea of what we're talking about. Because I realized, which shouldn't have been a surprise, but we're all very familiar with the triple meander, and the concept seems really easy, but unless you drive by it every day, a lot of people have literally no idea of what we're talking about. So I think just marking that stuff out. And then I was going to put together another little piece. I think we had a nice wide array of people who had no idea what a watershed even was, to people that were super well versed. So the people that live on the creek knew exactly what was going on and were all for it. The people that did not, and we had a handful of them, one of them is kind of jumping out in my brain, pointed on the map and said, well, I'm not in any of these because I'm up on a hill, so I'm good. I don't have to worry about this. And I had to say, well, because you're up on a hill, that means that you are kind of creating this problem for what we got going on. So we need to work through that. So I think maybe just a few talking points and little pieces that we can do. I know that the flyer we hand out is great. I'm just wondering if we maybe need to come up with something that's a little bit more interactive than just the kind of like reporting website, something where people can really kind of check in and see what's going on, especially those people that aren't connected, like living directly on the creeks. They're just, they need to get their minds opened up a little bit. That was the main stuff I had. Lauren, I see you got your hand up.
I thought you guys were the cool kids. I mean, you had a crowd at that stream table every time I looked over, and you were only bested by goats from Goats on the Go. And that's just because, you just didn't have an adorable live furry creature to pet. And so, the only thing I would think in the future that might be helpful is as we continue to make people aware of the problems, some of which, like you said, are becoming aware for the first time, transitioning to the what do I do next phase. So if an additional flyer with bullet points or things that people can do when there's not other resources like at a summit or anything like that would be good. So I just talked to a resident the other day that said, my neighbor throws stuff in the creek all the time and clogs it up. And I said, well, you need to report that to the city. But, simple bullet points like that. And it could even be other things like on rain gardens, et cetera, just so that people walk away feeling empowered. Because information's really good. Information, when we hear about the changing climate or environmental disasters, can also make some people feel almost paralyzed and overwhelmed. And so we want to take any energy and transition it to empowering change. And so the flyers that we have are reporting about the problem. So let's try to make people feel like they can each do one small thing or not do something that they have been doing that's wrong.
That's good. Mr. Patton.
Yeah, the people that I talked to, a couple of them had problems. They wanted to identify where they were on the map. And with only the two main roads in there, and I know there's a lot of stuff going on there with all the little creeks and things, but if there's some way that we can put a couple more roads in to give people a better sense of where they're located, that might be helpful, because it did attract people in. They right away wanted to try to say, where are we on this map?
Yeah.
The other thing I thought, and this is just from listening to Archeski with the water table, I know he got some comments that said, well, I don't have a creek in my property, so I'm okay. And he would explain to them about, but if you take a bridge to work, that you could end up with that bridge being gone, or if you have utility lines. So I think that probably was helpful for people to get an understanding of why this was important, even if you weren't close to a creek.
Yeah, I agree. The other thing I realized, I had a number of people ask about the honeysuckle and mention how that's kind of lining the creeks everywhere, and they know it's bad, but they didn't know, like, they were like, well, I would take it out because I know it's bad, but then I don't know what to put in place, and something has to be better than nothing, which it's not, I guess, is probably not wrong. So maybe a better list or a handy list of things to say, here's something you can put in there in the interim or whatever, because I mean, honeysuckles was a a lot of discussions for sure over a period of a few hours, I would say. Anybody else? Mr. Sturman, Mr. Onberg, Mr. Delanty, any of you guys have any other things that come to mind?
Just, it was a great turnout. And
Yeah, it
everybody
was.
seemed to enjoy it.
Mr. Delanty, I see you got your hand up. You gotta unmute. Still muted. Let's see. There you go.
Yes, I just have a question about, I noticed on the matrix that it talks about that there was a phase 1 of the public comment or public information, and that it was kind of ongoing, but I got to thinking about that when I was up there. I was at the summit, and something about this broader picture of what's happening and what we're doing versus, and I don't mean it the way it sounds, kind of this piecemeal thing. And I wondered about whether or not there is a phase 2 to this public information part of what's going on.
Yeah, I mean, I think the idea is, you know, our phase 1 was basically just to try to get people, I think, where we've been pretty successful so far, just the real basics of this is what's going on and this is what's happening. And as I would think, as we get this information back from the USGS and some of our other partners, that we'll be able to kind of roll that phase 2 out. Is that right, Mr. Vunich?
Yes, Mr. Chair. To Mr. Delante's question, as you mentioned, a lot of what we've been doing over the last 20 plus meetings has been trying to get people to understand the scope and severity of the problem in certain locations within the watershed, but also to have them engage with us and let us know where those problem areas are. As you know, when the executive director from the Metropolitan St. Louis Sewer District visited Wildwood and spoke before our city council, he noted there were only 2 projects in Wildwood that were on their future funding list. Now they probably have 95 to 100. And so I think that's been really successful in that regard. I believe phase 2 began this past Saturday with the efforts of Ms. Ripito and Mr. Newberry. We created a new brochure that kind of highlights some of the major steps or successes we've had. I don't know if you all got a chance to see that. We included it in your packet. And so I see that along with the Lawn and Garden Summit as the beginnings of that second phase of the public education campaign. And then as Mr. Farmer just mentioned, when we start getting more information from USGS, I think that's probably phase 3, because a lot of that will be technical, but also I think it will help us understand what climate's doing to our watersheds, what urbanization has done, and how best to address it in the future. So those are what I'm thinking might be our next couple of phases, one of which we've kind of completed, another which we just started, and one out in the fall. They're coming pretty soon. Thank you.
Thank you.
Carol, I see you got your hand up.
Yeah, I just wanted to provide a little background. When this all started way back when, the view of the vision for the committee was that, you know, we had to, our focus was on making the public aware of the problems and putting a stormwater tax on a ballot and hoping that there would be enough resident support to, you know, pass a tax measure if people understood what the issues were and what we wanted to do about them. So there's been kind of a pivot, and I think we have done well in helping some people, you know, a lot more people understand what's going on in the creeks. I think that, you know, in listening to the comments from the summit, I think we've got a lot to do in terms of helping everybody understand how it affects them, even if it's not in their backyard. And I think we do have, you know, bridges and infrastructure. I think water quality is maybe something else we can talk about that people can understand. And if not the idea of more sediment downstream bothers them, I think the idea of sanitary sewers breaking and that mess getting into our groundwater probably does get most people's attention. But I also want to circle back to what Lauren said. I think, our next phase is maybe focusing on more the proactive things, both with, finding those HOAs and subdivision trustees that we need to engage in improving detention basins, but also what individuals can do. And I'm kind of wondering if we can maybe take the honeysuckle issue and how do we remove it and what do we replace it with, and maybe do some sort of community event in the fall where there'd been some talk about, we could provide dumpsters if neighborhoods wanted to, organize a honeysuckle removal event. And maybe we could find either some sponsors or a little city money to have some. I know I planted willow twigs. They look like straws back in the day as part of an Arbor Day, but I don't know if that was really the best solution or the best time of the year to do that. But, maybe we can, kind of all think about between now and the next meeting, some ways we might have some positive events where people would kind of like this Operation Clean Stream, where you have sort of a designated period of time where you're trying to sort of rally people to go out and take a very specific action in that period. So.
It's good. So actually, I had a quick thought on that. So I see your hand up, Mr. Vunich, but is the city going to do the tree giveaway thing it always does I think it's at Arbor Day, isn't it? Or was that kind of like a 1 or 2 year thing?
Well, Mr. Farmer, we used to do that in conjunction with our Arbor Day 5K run. And since we're not having that this year, we haven't really talked about handing out the saplings we get from Missouri Department of Conservation. We are having an event at the community garden on Arbor Day, so there may be an option there. And certainly if there's some direction, the saplings are from the MDC, Missouri Department of Conservation. So we certainly could do something if you like.
I mean, I know it's coming up here next month. It might not be a terrible idea to, put out there that, hey, these are some, I think that they might, you never know, I guess, what's going to take, but certainly there's some trees that are good options to put down in the creek as opposed to honeysuckle for sure. All right, cool. I saw Mr. Vunich, you had your hand up. Was there something you wanted to add?
I'm struggling with my computer screen. Sorry.
Oh, that's okay. Does anybody have anything else they wanted to add? All right. Well, moving on, I think we've got our Wilson Hydro proposal up next. Is that you, Joe?
Yes, sir, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, Madam Chair, and members of the task force, as many of you may recall at our last meeting, we had a lengthy discussion about the 10 priority detention retention basins in the upper reaches of the Caw Creek watershed and the potential benefit they might bring in addressing problems starting from the Triple Meander downstream to the confluence at the Missouri River. The direction the task force provided to the department was to seek from our consultant team, Joe Wilson and Todd Wagner, a proposal to look at the 6 of those basins that are upstream from the Triple Meander and a cost associated with doing the initial screenings to see what it would take to improve them to current standards, either through increase in volume, changes to the outfall structures, etc. The department received that proposal at the beginning of this month and is providing it to you tonight for your consideration. The amount of the proposal for the 6 basins is $12,000, and the availability of the team is almost immediate. So if it's something that the task force would support and want to make a recommendation to City Council, the department would then respectfully request a motion, second, and a vote on the matter. Thank you.
All right. Carol, I see you got your hand up.
Mr. Vunich, I'm wondering how that $12,000 compares to what's sort of still uncommitted in our budget. My sense is that would about spend the balance of what we've got available for the year, but correct me if I'm wrong, please.
Well, Ms. Holzhaus, I have, I think, better news than one might expect. As you know, we started out fiscal year 2022 with about $250,000 in the budget for this task force. About $110,000 of that was set aside for the yearly payment to the United States Geological Survey. We've committed approximately $30,000 or $35,000 to Wilson Hydro for previous work, specifically the pre-permitting, and then the few items that they've done relative to the engineering component for pre-permitting. So at this point, we still have available funds to proceed with this if we should choose.
Right.
Thank you. I love it when there's more money available than I thought.
Mr. Sturman.
Yeah. Does that include, you may have said, excuse me, but not only the estimating, but does that also include all engineering design of how to treat the basins to, I mean, all the work, engineering drawings and estimate?
With the permission of the chairs, Mr. Chairman, I don't believe it does. I think the way it's been described in the proposal as the initial screening, this is just to see if there is even, if they would work, and if so, how MSD would approach from a permitting standpoint. And then also just gaining that information from the homeowners association and the trustees, whether they would be willing to proceed or not. I think the engineering would follow and obviously be additional cost.
Yeah, I'm seeing in there, they're actually suggesting at the moment that they would bill some of that hourly based on what we wanted to do next. But I would assume that, you know, if we went down that road, we would probably be able to amend that to an actual real proposal as compared to just however long they wanted to dig around out there. Carol?
The other thing, if we, you know, aren't, if we're looking at, you know, being able to spend that money, the $12,000 and maybe a little more, if they could include perhaps some language about what their design criteria is, that it's not, you know, flood control of peak storms, but that we're, you know, what we're trying to achieve in terms of reducing the energy and the flow rate into our creeks. I'm wondering if that might be a piece of work that could be used to update our ordinances or codes, and maybe be a cut and paste into a stormwater management plan down the road. Because as I understand it, fundamentally what we're doing is changing the, you know, the intent of these ponds. And I would think they could probably, as they were doing that work, pretty easily document what those standards were they were designing to. With a view that would be able to, you know, leverage that to some other initiatives we want to have down the road.
Hey, one question, I guess maybe, Joe, I'm not sure if you'll know this or not, but I'm looking at the list of the basins they're talking about, and there's 1, 2, 3, 4 of them that are upstream of the triple meander. So it's all the other ones that they're talking about. That those are the 6 that we've defined, right? The I guess they're in kind of in pink.
All 6 of the basins should be upstream of the triple meander.
Yeah, I'm looking at the graph they gave us. So
okay.
So yeah, so okay, so I mean, I think, you know, as we've done here for the last few years, you know, more information is always good. And I have a hard time understanding how these basins aren't going to come into play at some point when we're trying to fix this thing. So I guess we're looking for somebody that would like to make the motion to proceed
Mr.
with
Chair,
this. Yes, sir.
If I could just interrupt. I know
Yeah.
Rick Brown's here, our Director of Public Works, and before calling for a motion, if he has anything he'd like to add, I'd appreciate it.
Yeah, Rick, you got anything?
No, I just decided to show my face so as this topic came up, but no, I think it's a good proposal and it's a good first start. I look at it as being a conceptual study of this potential project, as Joe referenced to. So if it goes forward, there would be another layer of engineering, unfortunately, that would have to be done to get it to a construction stage. But it's a good first start.
All right. Yeah, Mr. Rottenberg.
I will make the motion that we proceed as suggested by Mr. Vunich.
All righty. Would anybody care to second?
I'll second.
All right. I think I heard Mr. Sturman chime in there. Awesome. Okay. Any other comments here before we go to a vote on the motion? All right. All those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
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 Anyone opposed?
Aye.
I assume that wasn't in favor, unless it was opposed. It was. Any abstentions? All right. Well, we'll move this guy forward. I think that's a
Mr.
good
Chair,
plan. Yes, sir.
Thank you all. Thank you all. And I will contact them about Ms. Holtz's request to add the design criteria to
That'll be
the
great.
proposal.
Is there anything else you wanted to add on those kind of bullet points underneath it? I mean, I think that kind of takes it all in there. So how about, is the watershed master plan you as well, Joe?
Mr. Farmer, Mr. Brown, Mr. Newberry, Ms. Ripito, and I do not have anything prepared for that tonight. We keep it on the agenda so it doesn't get lost on the back burner of the stove, so to speak. But it's something that we'll try to pull together, or at least we hope to pull together sometime over the next couple of months for your consideration.
Awesome. Then I don't know that I see anything else really on here. Is there anything else anybody wanted to add? Am I missing something? I got one quick thing. I don't know if anybody else got this in their sewer bill, but I got this beautiful sign that apparently they're going to start putting places. So that'll be exciting. It's where stormwater and sewer water meet. And if things are flowing out, you should let somebody know, according to this letter. So that'll be fun this summer. Mr. Berger, I see you got your hand up.
Yeah, thank you. I believe it was maybe last meeting, we had gotten a pretty timely update that the state of Missouri was looking to potentially commit some funding to the city. Did that get confirmed? I may have missed any update on that. I wasn't able to attend the city council meeting following that.
Steve, did you want to take that, or you want?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Berger, at this point, no. Our consultant in Jefferson City is working with the senators and the chair of the funding committee there to try to bring that to fruition. But those things, there's a lot of machinations that needs to go through. So still very hopeful and very positive. I haven't heard anything to the contrary, but no, we don't have a check in hand just quite yet, but we stay on him just to make sure he keeps moving forward.
Great.
Mr.
Thank you for the
Sturman.
update, Mr. Cross.
I'm sorry.
Oh, he said, thank you for the update.
You are welcome, sir.
Mr. Sturman.
Mr. Vunich, did I hear correctly? MSD is up their amount of projects in Wildwood. Did I hear 95 or how many? So
Again, Mr. Sturman, one of the things that kind of shocked us all is the city council invited the executive director of the Metropolitan St. Louis Sewer District to a meeting. It was in advance of their stormwater tax that they were placing on the ballot. And surprisingly, he said at that meeting that there were only two locations in Wildwood that were on their future funding list. And we all kind of looked at each other and said, how could that be? And so that's what we did the first year, is just solicited from anybody that lived next to a creek or saw a problem in a creek to let us know. And so we built a list of, like I said, about 95 to 100 locations throughout different watersheds in Wildwood that we've delivered to the Metropolitan St. Louis Sewer District. So the next time they visit Wildwood, they can say, no, we have 100 projects now, not 2.
oh, okay. So that was sent to them, and so you haven't heard back. Okay.
Mr. Sturman, they still have no funding, and they still just keep telling us they can't do anything for us right now.
Okay, because the next question I was going to ask was what type of work they were proposing to do and if they were going to pay for it. But you answered that.
All right. Well, does anybody have anything else they'd like to add this evening? Doesn't look like it. I guess then with that, our next meeting is at the end of April. So we'll see you guys then. I guess I'd be looking for Mr. Rottenberg.
I will make a motion, we adjourn.
All right, we got a motion to adjourn. Is there a second? Mr. Berger, excellent, non-debatable. All those in favor of adjournment, please say aye.
Hi.
Aye.
Aye.
Thanks everybody for coming out again. We'll see you next month.